Welcome to another Apex Systems ERP Essentials webinar series. Today is going to be LPL, going beyond what you thought was possible. Just a little bit about Apex Systems. We are a leading global technology service business that incorporates industry insights and experience to deliver solutions that fulfill our clients' digital visions. Our Infor experts not only ensure seamless implementations, but also provide ongoing optimizations to enhance your business operations. Apex has a global presence in over 70 locations and India. At the end of our presentation, we will give you some insight into how to contact us on our ongoing webinars that we have, as well as a link to our YouTube page. I'd like to go ahead and turn it over today to David Tashima.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is David Tashima. I'm a technical solutions architect who will be presenting for today. I've been a technical solutions architect for the last 26 years in the Infor Lawson space. And something specifically about me is that I really, truly enjoy trying to figure out these challenging solutions to problems that clients might come into play when they're going through their implementation, or things they may not have thought about when they were going through their info applications. And I really try to achieve fantastic results for whatever they may encounter for their integrations. So for today's agenda, I kind of wanted to break this down into three main sections about LPL. First, I wanted to present the idea that configuration console LPL is more powerful than what you may have thought of, or even maybe even Infor thought of, in terms of what you can do in terms of development. So I wanted us to kind of think about going beyond what you thought was possible with LPL. With this LPL development mindset, I specifically wanted to look at the data extracts for other systems that you may be encountering. So when we look at these data extracts, I kind of wanted to provide like a brief history of how Infor has sort of evolved and traditionally completed data extracts for interfaces, specifically between how Infor went from version 10 and all the way up until today, where we have these landmark applications in a multi-tenant cloud suite architecture, and trying to figure out how LPL can be used in this type of environment. Just as a reminder, LPL and this session in general really only applies for landmark applications. So this doesn't really apply for WFM, M3 applications, since they are not built on landmark technology. So we're really looking at the HR talent, FSM, finance, and supply chain applications, which are typically seen in the landmark environment. Granted, also, LPL can be used for inbound interfaces as well. And you can create fully custom modules and full-blown applications as well. But today, we're just going to focus on the extracting of data from a landmark application. And then sort of the third part of this presentation, we're going to take a deep dive into the actual LPL coding. This is for all the developers out there who are interested in seeing what these coding structures logic sort of looks like, and get a feel and an idea about what it takes to really program LPL for these data extracts. So how can configuration console LPL really open up your development world and what you could think of? So with that in mind, and as we begin, I do need to level set and just make sure we have an understanding of what is LPL when I talk about that. So I just want to make sure that we have an understanding what that is, and what LPL is really used for um, when we talk about landmark technology. So with those two things in mind, just to sort of get us on a base understanding of what this LPL really means. And as I was thinking about LPL and how do I define this, and I could look this up, I figured, well, why don't I just ask Google? What is Infor LPL? I figure there's all these with today's AI, you could have used ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, but I decided Google search was sort of the best way to sort of figure out what is Infor LPL and see what it tells us. And here's what it came up with. And I thought this is pretty good. So it says Infor LPL. It's a proprietary language used within the Infor Landmark Technology platform to configure and customize applications. I thought, well, that's great. That's exactly what this LPL is, um, and trying to do for customers in terms of customizing and configuring your applications. But the thing I thought was interesting, or what Google noticed down here too, is that LPL is used to define the appearance and behavior of user interface components like forms, lists, and buttons. And this I thought was an interesting concept. And I thought even Google thinks that LPL is used just to modify forms, lists, and buttons. And I thought, well, that's really a sort of not just what LPL can do. I thought that was kind of interesting. Because if you look initially at what LPL was sort of thought for when Infor sort of rolled out configuration console and LPL, they really it was really focused on sort of personalizing lists and forms and maybe customizing these forms and lists for specific users and menus. You could, for example, change colors on a form in terms of specific fields will sort of be highlighted. You could add, remove fields on a list in a form. Maybe you could create some new user fields and add them to the forms in the list. And then, sort of, other topics they would also provide is to put custom validations on forms with these sort of entrance and exit rules. And this is all good stuff, right? For LPL to go ahead and perform these types of these configurations for you. But to me, I think this is really sort of just tweaking. So I really wanted to get an idea about let's go beyond just tweaking and customizing forms and lists and menus for customers. Um, and let's go beyond that. So, what if someone asked you, what kind of tool set should I use to develop a data extract that looks like this? And let's say this output has 60,000 records. Granted, the screenshot only has, 8 records here, but I really wanted to provide an example or an idea of what LPL can handle quite easily in terms of our simple, complex, and large data extracts in LPL. So this is just an example um, of what LPL could really develop in terms of a data extract. What that means is you can produce fixed length files, comma or pipe delimited files, custom record selections. So if you want to only choose a specific set of records, you can have complex data structures that have headers in this example, trailers, different types of record formats that you may see. You can create all these custom relations and joins between any type of business class in the Infor Cloud Suite applications. So you're not limited to just the predefined relationships or joins that may be there. You can also do complex translations, cross references, and difficult mappings that you may encounter when you're doing these types of extracts out of Infor applications. So if we're looking at sort of extracting data from Infor, I wanted to just do a brief history of how we got from the past to today in terms of how Infor does get its data or has traditionally gotten its data out of the Infor applications for third-party integrations. So for extracting these data methods, this is sort of how it used to be done. If you were a long-time user or a user of Infor applications for a while, you would know that um, back in the day, there used to be what they called the S3 Infor applications, which was their version 10 on portal applications. And traditionally, in those senses, that you would typically have 4GL and COBOL interfaces, which they called batch programs and forms to go ahead and extract data out of Infor That was sort of the most traditional way that you would get data out of V10 applications. Later, was the landmark technology, which used to just be the technology platform, which was built on sort of alongside the COBOL applications. And they brought along with that a technology called PFI, which was later known as IPA, which sort of integrated sort of these portal applications, but used this landmark technology, which sort of came about with these two platforms that evolved. And at that point in time, clients did want to move away from COBOL applications and writing things in COBOL. So PFI, which later became IPA, became much more relevant in terms of integrating your two applications or third party applications together. Then came the introduction to landmark applications. So first there was the GHR or HR talent as we now know it, applications which started to replace some of the 4GL version 10 applications in Infor. Then came finance and supply chain after that. But IPA was still the go-to tool, not just for approval flows, but all interfaces. Um, we could also use SQL and database tools for large data extracts, but a lot of times the IPA became the tool of choice or everything can be done with IPA sort of automation to get data out of landmark applications. Um, and so, I would typically get into conversations about, well, IPA can do that, or IPA can do this, or IPA, and people just started using IPA for everything in terms of getting data out of Lawson, getting data out of Infor, um, and all those types of integrations was really used heavily with IPA. Um, but slowly, what happens is that when Landmark moved to the cloud and the multi-tenant architecture, IPA was still the tool of choice, but we no longer had SQL access. And now we're sort of forced to and being constrained about using landmark queries as the only way to retrieve data. And so you'll see how IPA sort of got sort of into this realm of always creating these data extracts. And here's sort of what evolved over time is that IPA, when you're talking about data extracts for large samples of data, the run times are quite slow in terms of getting batch data out because IPA is traditionally it's a transactional tool. It was originally designed for approvals and for in baskets and for one record at a time to deal with transactions. It was not meant for heavy batch processing when you had, let's say, tens of thousands, 50,000, 100,000 plus, even maybe perhaps millions of records. Um, and people would then notice when they started using IPA for these data extracts and large data sets in general that they were getting these work unit memory warnings and issues, and these run times were really slow on the work units and logging and how that transactional tool was behaving for these large data extracts. And as a result, these interfaces would takes quite a bit of time, actually quite a bit longer than what they might have been used to if they'd come from V10, where they would build these for jail applications as well. But now let's take a look at this LPL coding methodology. First of all, the run times are tenfold faster. So anything that in IPA might have taken hours to run would be run in minutes in terms of batch processing, in terms of speed and efficiency in which this data is extracted. And the reason for that is LPL coding. All the applications in Landmark are written in configuration console LPL basis. So that is the language in which this Landmark technology is based on, and is actually designed for large batch processing. So when you go ahead and run these jobs or actions, um, you can monitor them and you can see how much has been completed, and everything is tracked within async, not within a work unit or an IPA. So the difference is that an LPL coding methodology is extremely fast in terms of batch processing for data extracts. Another benefit of using LPL, and when you're writing these um, data extracts for, is that you can have these sort of user-friendly parameter screens for these end users that they can go ahead and submit these jobs, which they are very familiar with within the application. Here's an example of a parameter screen that you can build, which says, okay, well, I want to go ahead and extract these remit tos for these beginning and end dates, and have specific flags that the user can go ahead and interact with to go ahead and run this particular job and then schedule it as well. So you can see how there's a much nicer user interface interaction with the end user to go ahead and interact with these data extracts as well for these sort of ad hoc runs. So, with that in mind, if we were going to be trying to use LPL, what I really wanted to take a look at then is how these LPL extracts are coded and how you can go ahead and create some of your own data extracts using LPL and going more and beyond than just lists and forms and menus. So for you to do that in LPL, what you would first need to do is create a user action using the primary business class, which is holding the data that you are going to go ahead and extract for. So you would need to know what is the primary business class of the data that you are searching about. In this particular example, this one is running off the employee business class. And I'm going to go ahead and use an action called Apex Employee Extract to go ahead and extract all of this employee data. And you'll notice for this action type that it is put on this set action. So this set action means I want to go ahead and grab all of the data set of this employee business class. With this also in mind, I think what I'm going to do is show what this would look like in a real environment as well. So if I were to go into configuration console, you can see I would create a new configuration object, and you would see in here this create new action. So this is where you would go ahead and create this new configuration console LPL. Within that coding, then you would go ahead and create these sort of sections within that LPL to go ahead and create the data extract. I'm going to sort of briefly walk through what those sections would look like. The first section that you would have for this for your LPL coding would be the parameter section, right? So we have these parameter screens that you're going to go ahead and build, and you would specify exactly which fields that you would like the user to go ahead and be able to enter in as a parameter. The next section then in this extract, you would go ahead and select exactly which records that you want from the business class be selected. So in this particular case, we are looking at the employee business class, and I would have an instance selection, for example, of where the HR organization is equal to the parameter HR organization that the user entered in, as well as the start date is sort of within that parameter hire date range that they may have placed on the parameter screen. So this is your traditional, which records do I want to select from the employee business class? The next section that you would traditionally use in this LPL code would be your local fields or your working storage fields. These are fields that are just local to this particular action. They're not stored anywhere. They're just used for translations. In this particular case, I have just three. One for the output data, which is a text um, variable, which I'm going to go ahead and build these records to. Another one is just the local employee, which I'm going to be assigning it as an alpha character. I'm actually going to be moving a numeric to an alpha field, so you can see what that looks like. And then this NL character I have is a my new line character, which I have to go ahead and specify for the end of line character that I would have for this data extract. So this is just sort of an example of how you can use local working storage fields for usage. Within your LPL coding, you would have action rules. Within those action rules, you would have set rules and entrance rules, which you can go ahead and apply. And this happens prior to the execution of actually grabbing and selecting that data from that business class. So you would typically have an entrance rule and an exit rule, which is before and after your data is selected. In this particular case, I'm defining at the very beginning in this entrance rule that my new line character happens to be a reserved character from HR organization business class. It's defining what that new line character is. I'm also specifying what my file name would be. So this particular one would be apexemployees.csv is what I'm naming this particular file. Within those action rules, I would then specify the instance rules. What this means is what is this LPL coding supposed to do for each individual record that it selects? So for that instant or that record, I want to go ahead and provide some logic and say, well, if the parameter that was passed from the user says I only want to have active employee records, that means if the employee is active or if the employee.active, then I want to go ahead and build this output data record and say, well, this is my data structure. I want it to be the employee, comma, last name, comma, first name, comma, and start date plus the new line. So this is really building out that comma delimited format for us in terms of this LPL structure. So if they are employee active, if they've flagged this parameter for active only, and if they're active, I want to write the record. Else, it's going to grab the employee record for everyone. Similar to how we had the entrance rules, then the exit rules is going to go ahead and actually build this record set and put it into the PFI file storage business class. Granted, you could put this data set and you could put it into a custom business class if you wish. You could put it into your own file storage business class where you have all these different types of files being stored and maintained as well. For this particular example, I'm just going to be writing this to a specific business class called PFI file storage, which sort of is a nice sort of holding ground for this data so we can see it. So in this particular exit rule, I am invoking a create to create this data record or this data set into PFI file storage. before I show this part about the and executing this LPL via the jobs, what I wanted to show was the actual code that this may look like within LPL. Um, you would see on the employee business class. So altogether, this LPL coding looks just like so. And you can sort of see how this layout is provided in terms of the parameters, the local fields, the instance selection, the action rules, set rules with your entrance and exit rules, and then the specific instance rules for that specific instance or that record selection that you wish to perform. So this is all the coding that would be needed to generate a basic extract. So once your extract is coded, you do want to go ahead and then execute this LPL code. So how do you do that? Well, you can go ahead and execute this LPL code via just like setting up a regular job within Landmark. So what that means is you can go to your jobs definition, create a brand new job, and when you do so, you specify the business class and the action that you just created within LPL. When you do that, you would have the option to go ahead and choose job parameters. And those job parameters would show up for the end user to go ahead and select how they want to go ahead and select this data set for these employees. Click OK, and then go ahead and run your selected job. You can, at this point in time, you can also schedule this job as well. So after the job runs, you can go ahead and monitor it and look at it and view it in async if you wish. And then you could come to see the results in PFI file storage. So under the process server administrator role, where this file storage is located, after it's run, you would see your file name called apexemployees.csv, and it would have all of your employee data just as you extracted um, and specified from your output data. And that would go ahead and create your primary data extract that you would go ahead and supply for your third party vendor. A couple of notes I do want to point out here at the very end before we wrap up is that you'll notice that this just creates a file in PFI file storage. Um, and um, LPL does not actually have the SFTP capability to go ahead and SFTP that to the third party itself. So what you could do in a sort of more advanced coding for LPL, you can go ahead and launch an actual IPA flow to go ahead and perform that SFTP portion for you as well. That sort of wraps up our lunch and learn for today. If you do have any questions following up from this particular presentation, feel free to go ahead and email apexinfo@apexsystems.com. We hope and look forward to seeing more of you at our monthly webinars. And also check out our YouTube channel at the Apex Plus Info that you can go ahead and see this particular presentation as well as any other presentation from the past.